Hello, Puget Parvy fans. Welcome back. It's been quite a long time since I've put out a YouTube video, so thank you for your patience. If you're one of my 30 loyal YouTube watchers, thank you very much for tuning back in. Life gets in the way sometimes, and that was the case for me. I recently moved up to Seattle from the Portland metro area, and so, life's been super busy getting settled. I'd like to start putting out some content again. I don't want to pigeonhole myself and say I'll come out with X amount of videos per week or per day or per month. But when I'm feeling like I have the mental capacity, I'm going to start doing these videos again. And I thought, what better time than right before the 2026 season? Of course, if you're a diehard Mariner like me, you remember the agony of Game 7 of the ALCS last season. It was such a bittersweet moment, as cliche as that sounds, because it was the furthest any Mariner team has ever been. At the same time, it was a heartbreaking way to lose in a series where you once had a 2-0 lead and a 3-2 series lead against the Blue Jays. But I think the Mariners, a quick preview of the season before we go more in depth. I think they're poised to make another deep run this year, and I've never been more excited for a Seattle Mariners season. I've been through some great Portland Trailblazers playoff runs. I've watched that wild card comeback in 2022 the Mariners had, but I don't think anything compares to the pure joy of last year's postseason. The nerves, the cheers, the loud stadium. I was lucky enough to go to some playoff games. I just want to talk about what's happened since that great playoff run and also preview this season. So just a quick recap of the offseason. Before I say anything about Josh Naylor, I think it is just so refreshing to have a free agent bat that wants to stay in Seattle, that loves Seattle, that makes it a destination to go to, because T-Mobile Park is a hard-hitting environment. Seattle is the furthest stadium away from any other MLB team, and so sometimes we feel kind of siloed as a city because it's hard to recruit free agents unless you pay Robinson Cano 5 boatloads of money. And so the fact that 5 days into free agency, Josh Naylor decides, I want to stay here. He has a relatively team-friendly deal on top of that. It was a great way to keep momentum after, a heartbreaking loss in the ALCS, but at the same time, a team that had gone farther than any other Mariners team in franchise history. After that, in the offseason, a bit of a lull. Not really much else happening for a while. I don't think the Jose Ferrer signing happened until either late December or sometime in mid to early January. I could be wrong on that, but that was definitely the most controversial move that the Mariners have made this offseason. Harry Ford had some cool moments last year when he got called up, but we all know what was going to happen if he stayed in this organization. He was either going to have to get really good at another position, be such a good hitter that you have to DH him every day, or play 2 days a week at most, because Cal Raleigh, the runner-up in the American League MVP race last season, is in front of you and will be for the foreseeable future. So we knew the writing was on the wall with Harry. We're gonna trade him. I think the controversy comes from the fact that as a fan, when you track a prospect since they've been drafted, you have this image of that player that might not be what other MLB fan bases or league execs see. And that was the case with Harry Ford. So when it happened, I wasn't I'd heard the name Jose Ferrer before, but I didn't know much about him. And so my immediate reaction was, okay, the Nationals won this trade. But you look more into his numbers and you say, was Harry Ford helping the 2026 roster? Probably not too much. And will Jose Ferrer benefit a bullpen that was overexposed last year? Yes. Later on in this, I'm going to go through stats of each player and percentiles, baseball savant. So we'll talk about Ferrer. But before I end the offseason recap, we have to talk about Brendan Donovan. If you're someone who watches a lot of like Mariners YouTube and follows Mariners Twitter, Brendan Donovan was talked about ad nauseum, and it was getting ridiculous. You had Cardinals fans who wanted Brian Wu back in a package for Brendan Donovan, which is ridiculous after the season that Wu had. Cardinals fans also saying that Brendan Donovan is like, you know, a superstar. He's a perennial 3-WAR player, but he's not worth a guy who finished 5th in Cy Young voting in Brian Wu. It was so relieving when Donovan was finally dealt to the Mariners right before spring training. We didn't have to hear his name in speculative talks, and, you know, he fits the mold of what the Mariners want to be. If you watched the ALCS last year, which I'm sure a lot of you did, Ernie Clement was a name and a player that just got on my nerves and probably got on yours too. He slapped the ball around, he got on base, he was pesky, athletic, and just sort of an old school style of hitting, put the ball in play, make them make a play. And I think the Mariners didn't have enough of that. I know that, you know, the long ball is what accumulates wins. It's what drives in runs, and ultimately it is more valuable in a lot of instances. However, the Mariners have nowhere near enough putting in play high average players, and Brendan Donovan is a leadoff hitter that the Mariners really haven't had since J.P. Crawford had his best season. This was something that the Mariners needed. If you listen to Locked On Mariners, you would hear Ty and Colby say they put themselves in a corner and made it so that Donovan was the only way to fill the roster. And I agree that they should have been in on some of these other middle infield or third base options like Brendan Lau. At the same time, it worked out. And so, you know, you can blame the process of the front office, but all we can really talk about right now is that it worked out. So with that being said, you know, there's some pile arms that happened as well, but that was pretty much the offseason for the Mariners. You know, lost Jorge Polanco, lost Eugenio Suarez, two guys that were crucial in the deep run last season. But I think the Mariners have kind of retooled their strategy, their hitting strategy. They're poised to be a better fielding team, which will come in handy with Jose Ferrer in particular. If you look at Jose Ferrer's career stats, especially like last season, nothing's going to jump out on you. He had a 4.48 ERA in 2025. Nothing to write home about. He pitched in 72 games, though, and he was used by the Nationals in a way that he hadn't been in the past. He had 15 save opportunities and 11 saves. So you really saw him sort of getting his sea legs under him, becoming more of a high leverage pitcher. You know, with modern day sabermetrics and data about spin rate and projectability of players, Jose Ferrer is one of those guys that you put him in the Mariners pitching lab and he is going to succeed. I just have a lot of faith that they know what they're doing when they find these relief pitchers, and Ferrer is not an exception to that rule. So if you look at Baseball Savant and not just his, you know, box score stats from his career, he's going to be a very valuable asset to the Mariners bullpen that was frankly overexposed last year. Ground ball percentage, 99th percentile. Barrel percentage, 93rd percentile. Walk rate was in the 95th percentile. And fastball velocity was in the 94th percentile as well, which is a great thing to see from especially a left-handed pitcher. One of the reasons why Tarik Skubal is so effective is because velocity from the left side does a lot more than velocity from the right side. You know, obviously Skubal's got the secondaries and the command, but that's a huge factor when you can throw the ball hard from the left side. And so the reason why I say, you know, switching up the infield might be beneficial for a guy like Ferrer is that high ground ball percentage. Brendan Donovan is not like the greatest defensive player of all time, but he's much more athletic than Eugenio Suarez. In addition, Cole Young will probably get the bulk of the second base at bats. He's a guy who clearly has been working on his game over the offseason, his agility he's been working on. And I see him having a much better defensive year than he did last year, partly because of a shoulder injury that stopped him from being able to throw the ball particularly hard. And then on top of that, Colt Emerson surely will contribute to the Mariners at some point in 2026. Who knows when it'll be, but also a plus defender. They knew what they were doing when they looked for a guy like Ferrer. I don't think he's going to be a ninth or eighth inning reliever unless the bullpen is really worn down on a particular night. But what this does is Gabe Spire got overworked last year. He got overexposed in the playoffs last year. And so having another lefty that's not named Caleb Ferguson is so important. I think the Mariners probably should have done more to acquire another bullpen arm, but they did leave some salary open for another deadline move if they choose to do so. So let's move on from Ferrer, everyone's favorite trade deadline acquisition, instant fan favorite. He is a unique profile in that on years where he wants to hit for more power, his average will go down. But if he chooses, I want to spray the ball around more this year, he can raise that average, maybe hit fewer home runs. But that sort of flexibility and hit tool where he's able to sort of fluctuate might come in handy this year when they've lost so many home runs in Polanco and Gino. I expect, with the addition of Brendan Donovan, he might focus more on power. Just a grinder, a hard worker, someone who leads by example, someone who likes to be here. Like I said, great to have a free agent, love the city so much that they want to sign here long term, and a pretty team-friendly deal. He's only going to be making $11.3 in 2026. He did that, I think, to give the Mariners flexibility. Brendan Donovan, just the prototypical leadoff hitter. I mean, these stats are incredibly consistent through his major league career. 281 average his rookie year, 284 average his sophomore year, 2024 278, 2025 287. I mean, the variation is very low there. His OPS is always in the upper sevens. He's just going to be a great asset to this team. Again, I thought some Cardinals fans might have overrated him a little bit when he was in trade talks with the Mariners for months. But at the same time, I think there are some national media folks who are underrepresenting the impact that he will have. Like I said, with watching the Blue Jays, a pesky contact first lineup, it's great to have a little bit more in our lineup, because I think that was something that could have pushed the Mariners over the edge in the ALCS last season. I'd love to go into a season preview. If you look at the rest of the AL West, it was a pretty quiet offseason. Now, I think the Mariners could have done more. I wish they would have gotten Devin Williams or another high leverage bullpen arm, because that's what lost them the ALCS ultimately. But at the same time, I mean, what did the Rangers do? I think they've made the most impact moves this offseason compared to other AL West teams. Getting rid of Semien and getting Brandon Nimmo, trading some defensive upside in Semien for some, better production at the plate. And then they also got Mackenzie Gore, who is a guy that's been on my radar for a few years, or I guess a couple of years, really. Another lefty, has the tools to be a good middle of the rotation or, even number 2 starter. So that was, I think they're doubling down as an organization and trying to be pitching first, even though, their ballpark really shouldn't be so pitcher friendly. But last year, one of the hardest ballparks, if not the hardest to hit in. The Astros continue to regress. They did sign Tatsuya Imai, a starter from Japan. Alvarez should be a healthy player again, a very dangerous hitter, one that as a Mariner fan, I never want to see him up to bat in any crucial moment of the game. But at the same time, they've lost a lot of steam as an organization since 2023, really. I mean, they lost countless players. They've lost Bregman. They've lost Tucker. The list goes on. And so I think this is really the Mariners division moving forward again. I think the Athletics will be an interesting story. I think their lineup is one of the best in baseball, and they've extended those young players for when the former Oakland Athletics will relocate to Vegas. They'll have a lot of their young core still there, which is awesome. And I think they're going to be a great team moving forward. As things stand now, the Mariners are going to run the West. I say that with more confidence than I probably should. I don't want to curse this team. As a Pacific Northwest sports fan, nothing comes easy, but there's objective viewpoints and national media folks that are not Mariners fans that see this team in the same light. That's, not a coincidence. There's not a lot of holes on this team. I think if you were to nitpick the bullpen, for sure, hopefully the deadline is fruitful in that sense. Their payroll is lower than it was to end last season, and ownership and Dipoto and Hollander said that they're hoping to be about the same spot that they were to end last season. If we get 5 healthy starters that were dominant in 2024, if we get that again this year, a lineup that is pretty deep, top to bottom. Think of a lineup with Brendan Donovan, Julio, Cal, Naylor, Randy, Dom Canzone, Ref Snyder against a lefty. I mean, just a lot of solid pieces both on the bench and in the starting lineup. I think there's an attitude change as well. I didn't get a chance to go to spring training this year, which sucks. But what you would hear about people reporting back from spring training is strictly business. The expectations are high for both the players and the fans. Really excited for Thursday. Really excited to see the season start. Julio is going to have an MVP type season because he's going to start hot and keep going. And Cal, he doesn't have to hit 60 home runs again to be a super productive and effective superstar. I think Brian Wu will keep where he left off. I think Logan Gilbert will have a bounce back year. And Bryce Miller, once his oblique is better, I think he's going to have a bounce back year as well. Yeah, I mean, just a lot to be excited about as a Mariner fan. And now that I live in Seattle, I'm excited to go to more games. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, as the YouTubers say. And follow me on Instagram. Puget Parvy is the handle. See you guys later.